Hi, I'm Eric with Kootenai Electric Cooperative. You're listening to Electrification Unplugged.
Hello and welcome to our first podcast episode. I'm Erica Neff.
And I'm Melissa Newcomer.
And we're part of KEC's Member Service and Experience team. You might be wondering, why does my electric cooperative need to have a podcast?
Well, we'll tell you a little bit about why we've started one. Our mission at Kootenai Electric is to provide our members exceptional service and dependable electric power at competitive rates. And in order to provide you exceptional service, we need a variety of communication channels. And so this podcast is just another way that we can communicate with members. It's also an opportunity to do a deep dive into the electric utility industry. This is our first episode with a focus on what electric cooperatives are. Future episodes will be hosted by a variety of KEC staff. You can also read related articles in our member newsletter or on our website, kec.com.
So why does it matter that we're an electric cooperative? What's the difference? The fact is, not all utilities are created equal.
No, and if you look at other types of utilities, like Avista, for example, they're an investor-owned utility.
We're different. We're member-driven.
Yeah. Electric cooperatives were formed back in the early 1930s, and there's actually a cool little history on how we got started. During the mid-1930s, 9 out of 10 homes in the United States lacked electricity. The utilities at that time were mainly investor-owned utilities, and they were reluctant to spend the money necessary to extend service to rural America, which is where most of Americans lived, because it wasn't profitable. And so President Franklin Roosevelt established the Rural Electrification Association in 1935, and a year later, the Rural Electrification Act was passed by Congress, and that made low-interest loans available to electric cooperatives willing to extend service to rural areas. And actually, as I've read over some of our historical documents, I've learned that in January 1938, 250 farmers from North Idaho formed what's now known as Kootenai Electric Cooperative. We had a small, what seems like a small loan now, of $214,000 from the REA. And we set the first pole in December of 1938. And just really what seems like, I'm sure, a short, 6 months later, we energized that first line. And that first line went from a substation on 15th Street, and it broke north and south. It went north to Bayview and south to Conkling Park. And it served 385 members and was 185 miles long. So that is what it took to start what's now Kootenai Electric Cooperative. And today, in fact, we have over 32,000 members and more than 2,400 miles of line. So we've come a long way in the last 86 years.
That's pretty cool. And it's hard to imagine now that those areas that were rural are now becoming urban. So as our area has grown, so has our utility. So another way electric cooperatives are unique is because we're guided by 7 cooperative principles. And Melissa and I are a little nerdy with this. At one point, we had to memorize
Yes, we
those cooperative principles. And you can check them out on our website. We won't read them all to you. But one of the main things to know is that we are owned and governed by you, our members. And most co-ops like KEC operate on a not-for-profit basis. So for this reason, we don't pay income taxes.
We also operate at cost. And as I mentioned earlier, we do have access to low interest loans through federal and cooperative banks. And we also have access to the output of the federal dams built on the Columbia River.
Yep, and that power is sold to us at cost and is some of the least expensive in the nation, as well as being carbon free, since the majority of it is hydropower.
Yeah, that's a huge benefit.
One of my favorite cooperative principles is concern for community, and we really take that seriously at KEC through our policies and the work that we do for our members. And one of the ways we do that is through our Operation Roundup program. Some of our members may be participating in that, and it's kind of just like it sounds. Members who participate round up their bills to the nearest dollar, and we put that money in a trust, and we have a board of members who decide how to award that money through grants in our community. We've donated around $1.5 million to our community, to nonprofit organizations mainly, but it could be schools or food banks or healthcare projects.
Yeah, that's such a huge impact for our community, but such a small effort really amongst everybody to just round up their bill to the next highest dollar. And so, for everybody listening, I'd encourage you, if you are not rounding up, you can see that on your electric bill. And if you're not rounding up, we ask that you'd consider participating, because it doesn't take a lot to help make this kind of impact to our community. So make sure you take a look and contact us if you'd like to participate.
One of the other cooperative principles that's somewhat relevant to what we're talking about today is voluntary and open membership.
Yeah, so that's actually the first cooperative principle. And really, essentially what it means is that our cooperative is open to all people that are able to use our services and willing to accept the responsibilities of membership. And really, the responsibilities of membership is that you have to abide by our articles of incorporation and our bylaws and policies and procedures. But really, it means as long as you're willing to pay your power bill, you can be a member. I like this principle because it really helps remind us of the foundational reason of why we were formed in the first place. We were formed because the investor-owned utilities would not serve those people in the rural area. And so now that is the first principle, is that anyone who's willing to pay for it, we will absolutely sign them up and they can become one of our members.
Right.
So the average co-op in the nation serves 15,000 homes and businesses, and KEC is more than twice that size. In fact, we are the largest electric cooperative in Idaho. Now, that might sound like a really cool brag, but we're actually only 1/10 of the size of the largest electric cooperative in the United States, and 1/20th the size of the average investor-owned utility.
But because cooperatives primarily serve more rural areas, we don't benefit from the same economies of scale as some of the investor-owned utilities.
Yeah, if you think about it, that, for us to build a mile of line, let's say, it's going to cost the cooperative relatively the exact same as it would the investor-owned utilities. We buy our materials from the same places, the labor rates are similar, that kind of thing. However, due to our rural nature, the number of customers served by that line, and therefore whose rates pay for that line, in the power bills that they pay, it's much lower for a co-op than for an investor-owned utility. So on average, I mentioned earlier, we've got about 32,000 members today, and we have about 12 members per mile of line. An investor-owned utility like, Avista, since they're the nearest investor-owned utility to our service territory, they serve about 3 to 4 times that. So they've got a lot more of an advantage for some economies of scale, just based on the density of their service territory.
Some other utilities that you might be familiar with are municipals. Sometimes cities own and operate their own electric utilities on behalf of their citizens. They are also considered public power. They could be called municipal utilities. There are some regional examples like Seattle City Light, Tacoma Power, and in Washington, they are often called public utility districts, or PUDs. So they kind of operate similar to co-ops. They provide power at cost. They have access to some of the low-cost power like we do through the Bonneville Power Administration. Another local example of this is Ponderay PUD up north of Spokane.
And the nice thing about, these other public utilities and similar to co-ops is that local control and member-driven governance is key.
We talked a little bit about how a group of farmers got together to help start Kootenai Electric Cooperative, and they were some of the first board members that we have.
Yeah, they were.
And that still exists today. Our board is formed of members who want to serve and help make the decisions and policies and direction and govern how we operate our co-op.
Yeah, so we split our service territory into 5 geographical districts, and then we have a board member that represents each of those geographical districts. If you want more information on that, you can view our board district map on our website. And then we also have another 2 board members who represent the kind of what we call the at-large positions, and they really represent everybody across our service territory, regardless of the district that they live in. So we have a total of 7 board members, and they are elected by our members, and they serve on a 3-year term. And each year we have a couple of positions that are up for election. In fact, we just had an annual meeting, and we had 3 of our board members were elected.
To be eligible to serve on our board, you have to be an active member of Kootenai Electric, and that means you have to be paying the same power bill as the rest of our members. You're making those decisions for yourself as well as your other members, and those board members always have all of the members' best interests at heart. One of the other things about being a co-op is we have opportunities for members who'd like to serve in various volunteer capacities. You can check out our website for some of those options, but some of the committees that we have that members could serve on are the nominating committee, the credentials and elections committee, and our trust board. So we're getting ready to wrap this episode up, but did want to share a little bit with you about some of the future episodes that we have planned. We definitely want to keep this podcast going and share information with you as we can.
Yeah. So some of the upcoming topics that we plan to have for future episodes really dives into the fundamentals of the electric grid. What is it? How does it work? How do we get our power in the Northwest, and just kind of the regional power supply constraints that the whole area is facing right now. We have had a series of newsletter articles, as I mentioned before, and blog posts that discuss all of these in depth. And there's a lot of really good information that is explained really well to try and understand some of these complex issues. But we also plan to supplement that with a podcast episode.
And introduce you to other employees or subject matter experts at our cooperative.
Yep, our employees are all local residents in this area, and we'd love to talk to you. We'd love to hear your feedback on what you think of the podcast. You know, if you guys have any ideas that you want to hear, definitely reach out to us. You can contact us through our website at kec.com. You can call us. Our direct line is 208-765-1200, or you can send us an email at kec@kec.com. Let us know what you think. Give us a 5-star review, as all the podcasters say. And, we hope you continue to tune in to Electrification Unplugged.
Bye.
Bye.